I still remember the moment I first heard it. A voice on the phone, hesitant, almost trembling, but carrying the weight of years of quiet suffering. It was Thomas Markle, Meghan Markle's father, speaking to me for the first time in a long time, revealing things he had never shared publicly before. And what he told me changed everything I thought I knew about the royal family, about Meghan, and about the story the world has been told for years. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. You see, for decades, the media has painted a picture of estrangement between Meghan and her father. Headlines screamed that she had cut him out of her life, that she had abandoned him, that he was just another inconvenient figure she left behind on her meteoric rise to global fame. But what if I told you that story was only part of the truth? What if the reality was far more calculated, far more shocking, and far more personal than any article, any interview, or any viral video could ever reveal? Thomas didn't just drift away from Meghan. He was asked to step back. He was asked to pretend they were estranged. And he did it, not out of choice, but because his daughter, the same woman who had captured the world's attention, told him to do it. Told him to act like he wasn't part of her life. Told him to vanish for the sake of her image. Can you imagine being in his shoes? To be told by your own child that your love, your presence, your very existence in her story must be hidden from the world? Can you feel what it's like to obey a command that cuts to the very core of your heart, just to protect someone else's reputation, their carefully curated image? Thomas has lived with this for years. He watched from the shadows as Meghan married Prince Harry in a fairy tale wedding, knowing that behind every smile, every wave, every perfect photograph, there was a secret he was sworn to keep, a secret that made him a ghost in his own daughter's life. And today, for the first time, he's speaking out about it. The first question I asked him was simple. Why? Why would she ask you to do this? Thomas hesitated, his voice heavy with emotion. She wanted the world to believe we were estranged, that I had somehow failed her, that I wasn't part of her story, he said. But it wasn't true. We were close once. I loved her, and she loved me. But she asked me to hide that love, to erase our connection, and I did it, because I had no choice. It's hard to overstate the emotional impact of this revelation. For years, the public, and even the media, has taken Meghan's narrative at face value. We've seen the glamorous appearances, the red carpet photos, the interviews where she talks about independence, resilience, and personal triumph. But Thomas's story flips everything on its head. It's not just a story about fame or media manipulation. It's about family, loyalty, betrayal, and the price of protecting a public image at the cost of private truth. What makes this even more shocking is the timing. Why now? Why after all these years? Thomas explained that the weight of silence had grown unbearable. Every time Meghan appeared on television, smiling, radiant, seemingly untouchable, it reminded him of the truth he was hiding. And when she recently gave another interview, an interview that painted her past in a certain light, it became impossible for him to stay silent any longer. Imagine the conflict. Wanting to love your child, wanting to support them, but also watching as the truth of your relationship is twisted for public consumption. Imagine knowing that millions of people are seeing one story, while you alone know the story underneath. Thomas told me he felt like a prisoner of his own complicity. And that complicity wasn't born out of deceit, it was born out of love. A love so powerful, so complex, that it forced him to obey a command he would never have imagined in his worst nightmares. But here's the part that will really make you stop and think. This wasn't a one-time request. It wasn't just about avoiding a photograph or skipping a family gathering. According to Thomas, Meghan orchestrated a long-term strategy, a careful plan to present their estrangement as fact. She gave instructions about how he should behave publicly, how he should respond to the press, even what stories he could or could not tell about her. Every detail of their relationship that didn't fit the narrative she wanted was buried, hidden, or rewritten. And it worked. For the world, they were distant. They were estranged. Headlines screamed it. Social media judged it. But in reality, nothing could have been further from the truth. Their bond, though strained by distance and circumstance, had once been strong. And now, it had been transformed into a performance, a role that Thomas was forced to play for the sake of image, reputation, and, ultimately, the public perception of Meghan Markle. You might be wondering, why would she do this? Why go to such lengths to manipulate the narrative of your own family? Thomas believes it's a combination of survival in the public eye and the pressures of being part of the royal family. But he also feels betrayed, because while the world applauded her as a figure of empowerment, he saw the cost firsthand. Behind the headlines and the red carpets, someone he loved dearly had asked him to step out of her life, not because of anger or distance or disagreement, but because she needed a story that fit a certain image. And here's the kicker. Thomas didn't just step back quietly. He carried the burden alone. There were no leaks, no whispers, no quiet confessions to friends. He watched from the sidelines as Meghan navigated fame, fortune, and the global spotlight, all while he remained invisible by design. Every moment he wasn't in public view was a moment he was protecting her story. Every time the press wrote about estrangement, he swallowed his pain in silence. Every time someone accused him of abandoning his daughter, he endured it, knowing the truth would have destroyed the carefully curated image Meghan wanted the world to see. Now, as he speaks out, the question becomes unavoidable. What does this mean for the narrative we've all accepted? For the media that has covered this story for years? For the millions of people who've believed Meghan's version of events? Thomas's revelations don't just complicate the story, they shatter it. They demand a re-examination of everything we thought we knew about family, fame, loyalty, and truth. And yet, this is only the beginning. There are layers to this story that go beyond estrangement, beyond public perception, and beyond the headlines. Thomas hinted at moments, conversations, and private messages that have never been revealed. Moments that show not just the complexity of their relationship, but the very human cost of living a life dictated by public scrutiny. Moments that reveal manipulation, heartbreak, and yes, even moments of tenderness that the world has never seen. So I ask you, are you ready to hear it? To hear the side of the story no one has dared to tell? To understand what it really meant for Thomas Markle to live in the shadow of his daughter's fame, and to obey a command that tore at his heart every single day? Because the story you're about to hear doesn't just reveal what Meghan asked of him. It reveals what she was willing to do to protect the image the world sees, at the expense of the truth that only a father could feel. But what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. Thomas's journey from quiet compliance to public revelation is filled with twists, betrayals, and secrets that go far deeper than anyone could imagine. And as we start to unravel this story, you'll begin to understand the real cost of fame, the price of image, and the human heart behind the headlines. The next chapter begins with a question that has haunted Thomas for years. How do you pretend your daughter doesn't exist when every memory, every photograph, every shared laugh screams otherwise? How do you pretend someone doesn't exist when every memory you have screams that they do? That was the question haunting Thomas Markle for years, a question that never left him, no matter how carefully he tried to obey his daughter's instructions. To the world, it seemed like a story of estrangement, a father abandoned by his daughter. But in reality, it was a carefully orchestrated illusion. And illusions, as we know, are often far more complicated than they appear. Thomas remembers the first time Meghan asked him to step back. It wasn't a sudden, explosive confrontation. There was no shouting, no accusations. Instead, it was calm, almost clinical. The kind of calm that makes you realize how serious the words you're hearing are. She explained that her life was changing, that the world would soon watch every move she made, and that any connection to him, even a visible one, could jeopardize her public image. Imagine being in that moment. Your daughter, the child you raised, the one whose scraped knees you kissed, whose laughter filled your home, is asking you to vanish, to become invisible, to pretend that the bond you shared never existed. It's almost unthinkable. And yet, Thomas did what he felt he had to do. He agreed. Not out of anger, not out of malice, but out of love. He told me that the early days of this estrangement were the hardest. Every family event, every public appearance, every media report reminded him of what he had been asked to do. He would watch from afar as Meghan moved through the world, always poised, always smiling, while he remained in the shadows. He became a ghost in the story of his own child. And here's the thing, the world doesn't see ghosts. They don't notice the people who are quietly asked to step aside. They don't see the heartbreak in a father's eyes when he knows he's being erased. They only see the story that's been written for them, the narrative Meghan wanted the world to believe. The headlines screamed estrangement. The tabloids spun tales of rejection. Social media passed judgment. And Thomas? He could only watch and endure it. But even as he endured it, he noticed something strange. Despite the careful orchestration, despite the public narrative, there were cracks in the illusion. Small moments where the world caught glimpses of the truth. A photograph where their hands almost touched. A story that mentioned him indirectly. A reporter who asked a question that made him hesitate. Every crack reminded him that reality could not be fully hidden. That the bond between father and daughter, once strong, could not be completely erased, no matter how much Meghan tried. Thomas shared one memory that still haunts him. It was during one of Meghan's early public appearances, long before the royal wedding. She had just stepped onto the stage, radiant in her confidence, and the crowd erupted in applause. He watched from a distance, a mix of pride and sorrow washing over him. And then, in a fleeting moment, her eyes met his. Just for a second. That second carried more weight than words could express. It was a reminder that, estrangement or not, connection persists. That bonds formed in love and nurtured over years cannot be entirely broken by instructions or public image. Have you ever had a relationship where silence felt louder than words? Where absence carried more meaning than presence? Thomas lived that reality every single day. The world believed a story that was convenient for them, but he knew the truth, and that truth was painful. And then came the media. The tabloids, the social media speculation, the endless articles dissecting every move, every glance, every photo. Each one was a dagger, a constant reminder of what the world thought was true and what he knew wasn't. Every headline screamed that he had been abandoned, that he was no longer part of Meghan's life. Every story painted him as the villain. And through it all, he remained silent, because speaking out would shatter the carefully crafted image she wanted the world to see. It's strange to think about the power of narrative. One side tells a story, and the world believes it. The other side, often the one living the reality, is rendered invisible. Thomas described it as living in two worlds at once. The public sees one reality, while he experiences another, far more complex and painful. And yet, despite the estrangement, despite the deception, he never stopped loving her. Every step back, every hidden moment, every forced absence was an act of love. But love, when hidden, becomes heavy. Love, when constrained by instructions and public perception, becomes a burden. And that burden shaped Thomas's experience for years, making him a reluctant actor in a story that wasn't truly his to tell, until now. Have you ever wondered what it's like to watch someone you love ascend to global fame, knowing that the ascent comes at the cost of your connection? Thomas lived that reality. Every red carpet, every royal engagement, every glowing headline was a reminder that the bond he cherished had to be hidden. And in hiding it, he lost something fundamental, the freedom to love his child openly. But there's another twist. While the public assumed estrangement, Thomas learned something even more shocking. Meghan's instructions weren't just about stepping back. They were about shaping a narrative so precise, so controlled, that even minor deviations could threaten the image she was building. He had to be invisible, but in a way that also made her seem independent, strong, untouchable. His very existence had to be curated or erased, depending on the audience. Think about that for a moment. A parent asked not just to step aside, but to actively contribute to a false narrative, to play a role in a story that rewrites reality, to become a supporting character in the tale of your own child's life, rather than living your own truth. How would you feel? Could you obey such instructions? Could you hide your love, your pride, your joy, for the sake of someone else's image? Yet, despite all of this, despite the heartache and the years of silence, Thomas hasn't lost hope. He still remembers the bond, the moments of connection, the love that once defined their relationship. And he believes that, someday, that bond can be restored. Though the path to reconciliation is uncertain, complicated by public perception, media scrutiny, and the decisions that have been made over the years. So when people hear about estrangement between Meghan and Thomas Markle, they're only hearing one side of the story. They're seeing the carefully curated narrative designed for public consumption. They're missing the truth that exists behind the headlines. A truth filled with love, heartbreak, obedience, and quiet endurance. But what Thomas discovered next, what unfolded after years of silent compliance, would push the story even further. It wasn't just about estrangement or narrative control anymore. It was about secrets, manipulation, and revelations that no one could have predicted. And as he started to reveal the layers of what had really happened, he realized that the world was not ready for what came next. Because the estrangement, as it turns out, was only the beginning.